Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call to order the meeting of the Santa Rosa Planning Commission for Thursday, April 28th, and ask for a roll call, please.
Let the record reflect that all commissioners are present.
Okay, so we'll let Commissioner Crocker sit down, and with that, move on to the approval of our April 14th minutes. Any, Commissioner Duggan?
I had two corrections. Number 8, I did not visit the site, and it says I did. And on number 9, I did visit the site, and it doesn't indicate I did, visit or not. So those are my two corrections.
Okay. Anything else? So with those corrections, they will stand as printed. Next, we're going to move on to public appearances, which is a time for any member of the public to come down and address the commission on matters of interest to the commission that are not marked tonight as a public hearing. So I'm going to go ahead and open public appearances. We don't have any members of the public moving forward, so I'm going to go ahead and close public appearances and move on to Planning Commissioner's report. Any reports down there? No. Yes, Vice Chair Stanley.
Yeah, I wanted to let the commission know that Chair Cisco and I did a sort of a drive around of Santa Rosa, looking at, with Keith Christopherson, not associated with the project tonight, to look at issues that have come up, sort of the unintended consequences of the hillside development permitting process and sort of the conditions that came out of general plan direction and council direction that has found its way into policy that can make projects more difficult. So we did a drive around and looked at a number of various projects that went through the hillside development permitting process and some that didn't have to, and the issues that arise out of that process. So it was an eye-opener for me. I think a lot of things start to happen that were not intended under that policy, and I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn, that planning will start working to try and look through those issues and see if there are ways that we can make it a less cumbersome project and also not end up with projects that are sort of against the intent of the policy, but sort of meet the letter of the policy, and that's where we tend to get into problems with policies conflicting with each other. So it was a very good field trip for us, and I'm sure it will come back at a later date.
Okay, anything else? And I just wanted to report that we had a Waterways Committee meeting this morning where we took a look at a concept for some apartments to be built in that kind of little wedge section at 2nd and Brookwood along Santa Rosa Creek. They're just sort of in the development stage of that, so they were looking for comments from the committee, and it'll come back later for more, concrete, pertinent comments when it's further along. We also had a report on sort of the review of the process up to date to look at the updating the low impact development policies and stormwater permitting policies. And we had an update from the creek stewardship actions, which are always really illuminating at how much trash we're removing from our creeks, and the level of volunteerism that we have in the community, which is always such a good news item. So with that, we'll move on to department reports.
Hi, just quickly giving update on some items that went before the City Council that may be of interest if you weren't able to attend or already watch. On April 19th, the City Council had a 2-part housing action plan series. That was a report brought out by a consultant that the city has hired, and also city staff, different members of different departments, housing, planning and economic development, and Housing and Community Services. And the two-part report, the first part of the report was a summary of the feedback that the city has received through a series of interviews. I think it was up to 25 interviews of regional developers and local developers of housing. So these are developers that are doing business in Santa Rosa, or have contemplated doing business in Santa Rosa, or haven't contemplated doing business in Santa Rosa. And we wanted to interview all of those different types of perspectives and find out lessons learned, or what are the opportunities, what are the constraints to doing housing in Santa Rosa. And so April 19th, the first part of that report presented to the council was the feedback received from those interviews. And then the second part was a series of initiatives that staff and the consultants, as a result of those interviews and also our own brainstorming and outreach efforts, put together a series of initiatives for the council to consider. And it was a real wide range. And so if anything, if you have time to access the staff report and the attachments, because the item itself, I think, took 4.5 hours. We went through a lot of material and a lot of discussion. So, but I really strongly advise you to take a look at the staff report and the attachments. You'll see there's one attachment that has it's kind of on a one-page, lists out all the initiatives that we were presenting to them. And the council didn't outright reject any of those ideas, and so we're moving forward. And I'm not sure if it's still on the May 17th, but May 17th or somewhat soon after that will be a follow-up report, which will take all of those initiatives and basically propose an action plan to accomplish them, and seek council direction on, now that you have more information about these initiatives, about what it would entail and the cost of doing them and the timing, which of these would you like to implement? And if needed, allocate resources to them. And so that's forthcoming. We're developing that now. And as you can imagine, our department covers many of those initiatives, because a lot of them are policy reforms. Like, for example, taking a look at our density bonus ordinance. And the idea is to look at it for opportunities to have density bonus beyond the 35% maximum that our ordinance offers currently. So that's just one of those many ideas that were presented. And I think that's it, unless you have any questions.
Vice Chair Stanley wants to add something to Planning Commissioner's report.
Well, it reminded me seeing Claire come up that, so I wanted to let the commission know that the drive around that we did was actually, Claire was on it, and so was David Goen, and it was part of the process improvement that planning is going through, and it was to look, it didn't come from Chair Cisco and I, it came as an idea that came from a member of the public, as also planning and economic development wanting to sort of advance some ideas of improving the process of which we review projects. So I just want to let the commission know this didn't come from us. We'd like to take credit for it, but can't.
Great, thanks. Okay, next, statements of abstention by commission members. No one is abstaining tonight. No consent agenda. So with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to item number 9, which is our only public hearing for the Lake Park Court subdivision. And it is an ex parte disclosure. Commissioner Dipple, anything to disclose?
I have nothing to disclose.
Okay.
I visited the site and I have nothing new to disclose.
I also visited the site and have nothing new to disclose.
I also visited the site and have nothing new to disclose.
I visited the site and have nothing to disclose.
I also visited the site and have nothing to disclose.
And I also visited this site with nothing new to disclose. So with that, Amy Nicholson is staff, and we'll give our staff report.
Thank you, Chair Cisco and members of the commission. The project before you is the Lake Park Court subdivision. The proposal involves a mitigated negative declaration, a tentative parcel map, and a hillside development permit to allow a 1.57 acre parcel to be subdivided into 3 single-family lots and the subsequent development of those lots with single-family residences on slopes that exceed 10%. The project site is located at 3524 Mendocino Avenue, which is located in the northeastern part of the city. It is just east of 101 and near the Fountain Grove Parkway and Bicentennial Way. This is an aerial photograph from several months ago. So the site for subdivision is bordered here in these dashed lines, and there have been some lot line adjustments, so these lines don't accurately reflect the legal lots, but there are actually 2 lots that exist here and then 1 additional lot here. And those aren't before you today. Those lots are flat enough that they are not, they don't qualify for hillside development review. The area is mostly developed. This area here is the Vineyard Memory Care, currently under construction, and there is another senior assisted living facility here, and commercial offices to the west and single-family residences to the east and the south. And there are quite a few trees, many of which are concentrated at the lower slope of the site and the adjacent sites as well. Some history on the project. In March of last year, a neighborhood meeting was held and 2 neighbors did attend. They had just questions about the project, and some of the questions related to access to the site, and there is a private driveway that exists which would not be utilized for this project. And they also had questions about fencing that would be installed as a part of the project. In July of 2015, project applications were submitted, and in December, revised plans were received. And on April 8th of this year, the initial study and mitigated negative declaration were circulated for the 20-day public comment period. The general plan land use designation of the site is very low density residential, which accommodates rural and hillside developments and is primarily intended for detached single-family units. It does allow between 0.2 and 2 units per acre. There's a number of general plan goals and policies that are applicable to this project, including meeting housing for all of Santa Rosa's residents and preserving significant natural features and prohibiting development where the structures would interrupt the skyline. In addition, the project includes hillside development review based on slopes exceeding 10%. And then there are several urban design policies that are applicable to the project, including that development be sensitive to the existing terrain and that grading of slopes that exceed 25% should be prohibited. The project site is zoned RR20, which is rural residential, and single-family residences are permitted by right. Surrounding zoning is a mix. There's office commercial to the west, single-family to the east and south, and the Fountain Grove Ranch plan development to the north. This is the slope analysis of the project site and then the 3 other lots I spoke about earlier. The yellow indicates slope averages that are less than 10%. The green is between 10 and 25%, and the light blue is are slopes that exceed 25%. As you can see, there is a fair amount of slope area that does exceed the 25% amount concentrated in the western portion of the site. And according to the zoning code and hillside development for subdivisions, lots cannot exceed an average of 25%. In this case, the lots do not exceed 25%, and this is accomplished on lots 2 and 3 by taking out the total which is reserved for private open space, and I will talk a little bit more about what that means in a moment. Also, what may be of interest is the slope underneath the building footprint that exceeds 25% is about 31%, just to give you an idea of what that number is. This is the proposed parcel map, and so there are 3 lots. One lot is 27,700 square feet, one is 20,300 square feet, and one is 20,400 square feet. So they do meet the minimum lot size for the zoning district. This is the area of private open space, and the private open space is conditioned to be maintained free of any structures, grading, retaining walls, and it can include native plantings like trees that are native to the area, but that's pretty much all that's allowed, with the exception of storm drain discharge elements that are required. And finally, this is a street that has been approved already through engineering. It is not on the project site itself, but it would provide access to the 3 proposed lots in addition to the 3 other lots. So this is the site plan showing the building footprints again, and the project does meet the standards for hillside development. It does include a minimum of a 15-foot, well, greater than that, side yard setback, and the 20-foot front yard setback is met. And then the RR20 zoning district actually requires a more restrictive rear yard setback, and that is accomplished in this project as well. Parking is met with 5 spaces, and where 4 are required, and there is no parking available on the private street. So each lot utilizes the same floor plan, but there are differing elevations. The floor plans have been reviewed, and the structures don't exceed the lot coverage that's allowed for the zoning district, and each structure is underneath the maximum height allowed in the zoning district. So that's lot 1 and 2 and lot 3. The project has been reviewed in compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act. There was an initial study prepared which resulted in a mitigated negative declaration, and there was a public comment period from April 8th through April 27th of this year. No public comments were received, and mitigation measures related to air quality, biological resources, cultural resources, geology, soils, and land use and planning were incorporated into the document. These photographs show a visual analysis of the site and the surrounding area from some major public vantage points, including the Fountain Grove Parkway and Mendocino Avenue. The structures are superimposed and are shown in front of the tree cluster, but would not be visible based on the dense line of trees that exist and the topography. And this has also been confirmed through several site visits as well. So upon review of the project, there were some issues that came up, one being development and really the creation of lots on slopes that exceed 25%. There is a general plan policy that I referenced earlier that prohibits grading of slopes that are greater than 25%. And then the policy further directs that during review of development plans, staff should ensure that natural resources are preserved and that the grading visually blends with adjacent properties. Staff has determined that is the case with this proposal. And the intent of the policy itself is to preserve the city scenic character, and based on the visual analysis, it seems that it would be preserved. The zoning code does also allow for some discretion and flexibility with this policy in that through a visual analysis, development on slopes exceeding 25% can be approved if those alterations are determined to be minor and visually insignificant or hidden. Staff, kind of weighing all these things, has determined that the proposed development on slopes exceeding 25% is minor in that the area is visually screened, and the buildable area on slopes exceeding 25% is an incremental amount above at 31%. When considering the lack of visual prominence of the site and the totality of the development in the surrounding area, the proposed lots and residences may be viewed as minor alterations. And hillside design was another topic that was discussed based on the houses themselves. They do have a low roof pitch, which is recommended on slopes of this scale. In addition, the foundations avoid flat pads and visually step down the hill. And then the applicant is proposing and has been conditioned to use kind of darker colors and earth tones so that the materials blend in more with the natural environment. And there's a section provided on the screen that shows this is lot 3, which is one of the steeper lots, if not the steepest one. And it shows the house cut into the hillside, which reduces the visual prominence. So although the proposal is not consistent with the general plan policy prohibiting grading of slopes greater than 25%, staff found that the project successfully balances competing general plan policies, and that it does allow for the maximum amount of housing allowed on that site while respecting a significant amount of natural trees and natural features. And also that the homes have been designed appropriately for the hillside. And while environmental impacts have been minimized. So it is with that staff is recommending that the Planning Commission approve or adopt the mitigated negative declaration and approve the tentative parcel map and hillside development permit. And that concludes my presentation. The applicant team is here to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions of staff right now? Commissioner Groniger?
Just for clarification purposes, would you mind going back to slide 12, the site plan? And both from here and looking at it on 8.5 by 11, is there any significance in the color scheme there as it relates to the previous slides?
No, there's not. I was just trying to kind of pick up colors that jumped out, but they don't mean anything.
Any other questions of staff right now before we move on to the applicant? Okay. Thanks, Ms. Niskolson. And next, would the applicant like to come down and make a presentation? No.
So
Yes.
they can answer questions,
gonna
but the
answer.
engineer and the architect and the developer, they're all here, so.
Okay. Any questions that we might have of the applicant right now before I open the public hearing? Okay.
Except for the applicant. I see the civil engineers there.
Okay. Well, I'm not seeing a huge member of the public is not necessarily present, so I think you should go ahead and ask your question. It might prompt a question from the public.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had a question about, because now this notion of the hillside development issues that have come up and the unintended consequences, and I noticed on lot 3 on the sections that BKF did that there was a deeper cut into the hillside which allowed you to lower the profile of the building, which of course in a hillside environment is what we're trying to do. But in lots 1 and 2 you didn't do the same thing. Is that a design reason, or was that another one of our unintended consequences of the hillside development, is that we could have lowered the profile by doing maybe a little deeper bench cut into the hillside?
Commissioners. Jeff Coleman, BKF Engineers, the civil engineer involved with the project. Vice Chair Commissioner Stanley, to answer your question, actually, the hill actually steps down as you head further out to the west, and so that's the reason that the houses are a little bit further down. It wasn't necessary to nestle that house into the hill that far down. And then there are a couple of other considerations as well. One, the houses are being served off of a private drive, and we are trying to make sure that the road fit the contour of the hill. And so it was a combination of fitting the contour of the hill and then making sure that we had, positive drainage away from the houses. And we have a really short run with driveways because the houses are relatively close to this private road. So it was a combination of things, taking also into consideration that it was more desirable to gravity the sewer out of those houses and limitations with the utilities that kind of drove the elevations of those houses.
Okay, so it was a design thing.
It was a design thing. Thank you.
Okay, good. Great.
Any other questions of the applicant team right now? Not seeing any. Okay, well, this is a public hearing. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on this item, you can come down to the microphone, and I am not seeing any movement.
I have questions, but is now the appropriate time?
If you're a member of the public, come down and ask your questions. We won't answer them from here, but we will get an answer for you. And you've got 3 minutes, and if you wouldn't mind starting by stating your name for the record. Thanks.
My name is Peter Chandler. I have met many of the team before, and the owner, of course. I'm a neighbor. I actually live right off Lake Park Court. That is our private driveway that goes down the hill, and then back up around to where our houses are. Things that I would like to know, which we've kind of touched on in the past and just want to make sure that we're currently updated. One, originally a lot of my neighbors thought there was going to be 3 houses. I kind of assumed there was going to be 6. Now I understand why by coming here. One of my concerns is what is the mailbox situation going to be? Due to the fact that we have our 4 there, there's 4 houses off our driveway. And then the other one is going to be how, again, we brought up that fence issue previously along our driveway because we have our neighbor's fence on the one side that's on a slope, so it's up really high, and if we slap another one up on the other side, it's going to be quite the tunnel driving through. And Keith and his team had mentioned some other things. I just want to reaffirm what the current situation is. Other than that, there's not too much. Are they going to be cutting into our driveway would be a question. Because I do see marks across our driveway. Somebody had painted straight up my 3406 thing, painted right over the top of mine, so I don't know if that's going to be cut up too, which also means our mailboxes would need to be moved. And that's kind of about it at this point.
Okay, well, I'll see that you get those issues addressed. Thank you. Any other members of the public present? And again, I'm not seeing any movement, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. And if someone from the applicant team would mind coming down and addressing these issues that Mr. Chandler brought up.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Keith Christopherson, 4878 Hohen Avenue. The fence issue is, well, first of all, this doesn't really encroach on the road. The road is that one driveway that's over to the right, would be kind of right behind DEV, or the road would be behind LOP on development. But this does come up onto Don Martin Road on the southwest side there. And we plan to do all open wire, so it'll be visual through there, and try to keep it as natural as possible. And the mailboxes, I think it kind of comes down to what the post office makes us do. So we'll either have to have mailboxes up on the street or at the residences, one of the two.
And then cutting into his driveway.
Pardon me?
He asked about whether there'd be any cutting into his particular driveway.
No, we wouldn't be cutting into the driveway. We're not. We have no interest in doing that.
Okay,
Yeah, except for possibly sewer lines or something like that, but.
okay. I think that takes care of it, but maybe staff could give us some information about how does the post office interact with the city in terms of the placement of the mailboxes? Does anybody? I know. If you know, come on down. They don't do anything. Okay, you need to be in the microphone because we wouldn't capture.
That's my son, Andy.
Sorry. Hi, Andy.
I taught him better manners than that. But
have you dealt with this issue before at the point when you're building? I mean, how do you interact with?
Yeah.
In other words, when will he know what's going to happen with the boxes?
it's a negotiation process with them. They usually always want you to put up one of those aluminum boxes with the doors on it.
Like a gang.
And we always want to have it delivered to the house. So it's, it kind of comes down to who's the strongest negotiator that day.
Okay, but you won't know until it's much later in the development of the project.
No, it'll be probably within the next several weeks we'll have an idea.
Okay, and would you be willing to communicate that information to Mr. Chandler
Of course.
directly?
Certainly.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep.
Good. Okay.
Any further questions?
So, any other questions of staff or the applicant at this time before we bring it back to the commission? Yeah, Commissioner Duggan has one.
Yeah, I had just a couple of questions for the applicant, and I think also for our city engineer. First, in the development advisory report under grading, it talks about a landslide that was referenced in the geotechnical thing, and I thought the geotechnical report didn't mention any kind of landslide. And then also, I've just would like a description of number 16. It's under grading in the DAC about the surface drainage on lots 1 and 2.
Good afternoon. Larry Lackey, Engineering Development Services of Petaluma, Planning and Economic Development, head. The landslide that we are talking about is a mapped slippage that is shown on the soils report. It is a dormant occurrence. So it's somewhat stable, but nonetheless, it is shown, identified as a slippage, and we are deferring the actual treatment to the building permit review stage, and that was the reason for the additional letter, supplemental letter that will be required to be submitted with the building permit application. The soils engineer will be charged with reviewing that in conjunction with the foundation layout and the final grading plans that are submitted for the city review. The drainage is because it has slipped, we don't want to incur any additional slippage, and so the applicant is directed to construct a drainage system that circumvents the top of the slope and direct it away from that little slippage. This mapped area is roughly on lot 3, a little bit crosses onto lot 2, but it is in the open space area, so we are not expecting to have any impacts to the future building of lot 2 or 3.
Any other questions? Oh, yeah, Commissioner Gronica?
Really, my questions aren't substantive at all. It's more process. That is, I spent quite a bit of time reading the technical report, and I thought it was well done and addressed everything. But I was just more curiosity in terms of how it works, because there are a number of engineering features on this site. Now the report's prepared by a consulting engineer, and then at some point the developer hires an engineer, kind of a project engineer, then the work is performed. Does the city itself get involved in testing and inspection? How does that work, or do you depend upon the licensed engineer's report throughout?
The city does not go out there and test for the soils work that is done. The only testing we do is for public streets and utility trenches. The bulk of the grading review is under the control of the soils engineer, and in this case, it will be done in conjunction with the building permits that are issued for the individual lots. The final report from the soils engineer is then submitted to the city as a letter or as an addendum to the soils report that is on file, that is used to, in conjunction with the review of the building permit. And with that receipt of that letter, attesting that everything was done per his approval, we will then release the sign off on the final building permit. That process pretty much is the same on all subdivisions too. On a subdivision proper, where we have mass grading going on, we will ask for a final soils report to be submitted by the soils engineer, and that is the basis for, one of the bases for approvals of the subdivision by the city and the release of the bonds. Building permits are a little different because it is more of a administrative process, but we still put the burden on the private side to ensure that the slopes and grading are done according to the current standards of practice.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Lackey. Anything else before we take it back to the commission? Okay, so with that, we need to go through several of these resolutions. First one is the mitigated negative declaration. Would somebody like to move that for the purposes?
I'll make a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa adopting a mitigated negative declaration for the Lake Park Court subdivision located at 3524 Mendocino Avenue. Assessors parcel number 173-040-012-file number PRJ15-001. Wait for the reading of the text.
I will second that.
Okay, so that resolution was moved by Vice Chair Stanley, seconded by Commissioner Crocker. Any discussion on the adequacy of the mitigated negative declaration? Commissioner Crocker, you have anything you'd like to say?
No, I thought everything looked good. In fact, considering most of those mitigation measures are really just compliance with existing standards and regulations, it looked to me an awful lot like, almost exempt, you know? So I feel really good about the extra analysis that was done, and thank you, everyone.
Okay, any other discussion before we vote on that? Okay, so again, that was moved by Vice Chair Stanley, seconded by Commissioner Crocker, and your votes, please. And that passes with 7 ayes. Next, we have our tentative parcel map.
I'll make a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa approving the Lake Park Court tentative parcel map located at 2524 Mendocino Avenue, APN 173-040-012, file number PRJ15-001. Wait for the reading of the text.
I'll second. And can we correct the address? It's 3524? I believe you said 2524?
Thank you, Commissioner Duggan.
Okay, so that was moved by Vice Chair Stanley, seconded by Commissioner Duggan, noting a correction to the address. And Vice Chair Stanley, would you like to begin the discussion?
Well, I'll just combine my comments here because when we do this, it's the tentative map and the hillside development are really sort of, I think, part and parcel of the same thing. So I'm always impressed by the work that comes out of this office and also the architect that worked on this and also the developer himself. Of the objective of these projects always are to minimize sort of the visual impact of complicated sites, you know, and I realize this is a rural residential, but it's a fairly urban area of our community. So I think the tentative map was well done, cited the buildings sensitively to the existing natural features, and I'll withhold my comments about the hillside, actually. But I think the tentative map, I think the way that it was mapped and the manner in which you access this site was done quite nicely, so.
Okay. Commissioner Gronica?
Really have nothing of great substance to add other than in combination, I guess, both the geotech report, the neg deck, the material related to the map, and I would say the hillside development permit is real clear. And I appreciate the work that's been done both by the consulting engineers, the architects, and our planning staff.
Okay. Commissioner Edmondson?
I have nothing to add at this time.
Commissioner Duggan?
Not much to add. I also appreciate the way the buildings are sited and how they're not going to have a lot of visual impact on the surroundings. I also like the feature of the private open space. I think that's going to be very nice.
Commissioner Crocker?
Not much for me to add either. I think it's a great project, nice designs, well done by the team and staff. That's all I have. Thank you.
And Commissioner Dipple?
I don't have much to add. I'm just going to say that I'm going to support the project.
Okay. And I don't have much to add either, except I think this is going to really finish off that neighborhood very, very nicely, and agree with everything that Vice Chair Stanley has stated about the project. So with that, the tentative map resolution was moved by Vice Chair Stanley, seconded by Commissioner Duggan, and your votes, please. And that passes with 7 ayes. And
I
now-
will make a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa approving a hillside development permit for the Lake Park Court subdivision located at 3524 Mendocino Avenue. Assessor's parcel number APN 173-040-012, file number PRJ15-001. Waive further reading of the text.
And I'll second.
So that was moved by Vice Chair Stanley, seconded by Commissioner Duggan. And Vice Chair Stanley, you wanted to make some comments?
Yeah, so again, certainly the hillside development permit process was put in place for very good reasons, and I think that this applicant has always tried their best to find a way to sensitively place their buildings on these sites. The fact that it exceeds 25%, I want to thank staff for doing a great job of analyzing that. You did a great job. It really makes it clear to us that sometimes the policy just isn't in alignment with what we need to do. Here is a land use issue, but also trying to keep in our development in line with the intent of that policy, not necessarily the exact letter of that policy, which anybody who's read through the thousands of pages of policy know there's conflicts, and what we're always trying to do is to get to the intent, not just hold an applicant up. So I think the applicant did a fantastic job. They've got a great team, obviously. Staff did a great job of analyzing it, and it made it easy for me to vote yes on this hillside development permit.
Anyone else choose to comment on the hillside development permit? Not seeing anybody needing to do that. Again, thank you, Vice Chair Stanley, for your always thoughtful comments. And so that was moved by Vice Chair Stanley, seconded by Commissioner Duggan, and your votes, please. And that passes with 7 ayes. And I believe that concludes this item, and we'll conclude and adjourn our meeting to our next meeting in May. So thanks for everything.
Over 90 miles of creeks run through Santa Rosa. Runoff from streets, roofs, and parking lots end up in our creeks through the storm drain system. To help protect creeks, keep your street gutters and roadside ditches clear of trash and other pollutants. For more information on the benefits of our creeks and tips on how to enjoy them, visit the Stormwater and Creeks webpage.